a huge warm welcome and a huge thanks to Welcome for sponsoring the event, for letting us have this, amazing venue. And of course, there aren't that many venues around that are accessible, sadly. That's part of the reason we exist, isn't it, to try and change that. So it was amazing to have this fantastic space. And a particular shout out to Sushmita, where is she? At the back, who has done an amazing job. I mean, she's pretty much put all this on single-handedly. She's been working so hard in the background, and every organisation should have a Sushmita, I think. So, you're not going to let her go. Fair enough. So what I'd like to start with is talking about the research itself, which is kind of the bad news. It's about what disabled people are telling us are the barriers they face. I wanted to put a human face on that as well as the numbers. So we're going to hear from Will, who will explain to you his situation and what he's gone through to kind of put a human face to the story, as it were. And then we've got the best two trainers on the planet for you. So I think that's quite a good present early in the morning. So Adam and Toby will be going through some of the things that you and we as employers can do to overcome some of the barriers that we will have talked about earlier on. And then there'll be a couple of case studies of companies who've done some of this stuff and showing you how it can work in practice and what the results might be. So that's kind of the pattern of the morning. After we've all spoken, there will be time for questions. So please, feel free to ask questions. So just before we start, I always like, people who know me will know that this is what I always do. I always like to start with just a very quick reminder of the reasons we want to employ disabled people. So why are we doing all of this? So I've got 5 prizes for the first 5 people who come up with really good reasons for employing disabled people. Anybody? Ooh.
It helps us deliver services which are better tuned to the needs of everybody.
Absolutely. So I don't know if everybody heard that, but yes, so making sure that our customers are able to access what we do works really well. So yes, you get a prize. The prize is it's a book. You knew that was coming. So it's a book. It's a book what I wrote. So it's a bit crass really, but you can come and get your book later on. I'll talk about the book a little bit later on. Lovely. So yeah, we need to know what our customers need, and if we have internal intelligence, we're going to be able to do that much better. Excellent. Anybody else? Jackie?
Employers are missing out on massive talent.
Yes. So 20% of the workforce consider themselves to be disabled or have a long-term health conditions. So if we're missing out on that, look at all the talent we're missing out on. You've probably already got a book, haven't you, Jackie? You can have another one to give away. I've done this before, you can tell, can't you? Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Organisations should be reflective of society as a whole.
Yeah, and that's a good one coming from ITV, isn't it, as well? That's Robbie from ITV. So that actually, if you're a broadcaster or you're in the media, we need to be reflecting the audience that's there. Yeah, brilliant one. Yeah, so you get a book too. 2 more. Yes?
Research has shown that net turnover generally within the population is really low. So there's loyalty, there's really good, I think someone said earlier about really good people that will be with you forever. Really.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we do know is that disabled people tend not to leave their jobs. Now that might be for the wrong reason because they can't find another employer that's as good. But if you employ someone who's disabled and you value them and they have their career progression looked after, why would they leave? So you retain all of that talent. And also people who work for you and become disabled, you retain that talent as well. So yeah, that's an excellent one. And Simon, last one.
So I think it enhances the culture of inclusion and improves the psychological safety of the workforce.
Yeah. It changes the whole kind of culture and atmosphere, doesn't it, in a very, very positive way. So yes, so just all of those things you said, more candidates. Disabled people are on average just as productive as non-disabled people. Hiya. We have less sickness absence, we have fewer workplace accidents, we have improved retention, we can have that internal intelligence about new markets, customer loyalty, different thinking styles. If we are an inclusive employer of choice, you're an employer of choice, so you attract the best talent, whether disabled or otherwise, and all the benefits of diversity that we know about, and it's not just about race and gender, it's about disability too. So, yes, so thanks for that. So I'm going to present to you the findings of this research. So we did some research with, well, we didn't do it, we had it done by UCL, Enactus at UCL, because we talk a lot about the barriers that disabled people face, and sometimes that's a bit theoretical and sometimes we're guessing it, but what we wanted was the real story from disabled people themselves. So Enactus did this research for us, and we had a tremendous response, I think. So we had 709 responses. So I think that's significant enough for us to take notice of. It's not just we grabbed a couple of disabled people off the street and said, what barriers do you face? This was done in quite a structured way. So what we said to the research participants was, you know, what are the barriers that you face when you're looking for work? These are people with a wide range of different impairments from a wide range of backgrounds, and you have the report in your packs. But just out of interest, what do you think was by far the biggest barrier that people talked about when they were answering our questions? Any ideas? Quick. Attitudes? Could be. Any others? Yeah?
The interview process?
The interview process? Yeah. Any others?
Working out which employers might be open-minded to them.
You've looked at the report, haven't you? Yes, it's exactly that. It's what they said in effect was, we don't know which employers are safe for us to apply to, because every employer says we are an equal opportunities employer, but actually disabled people know that that doesn't always translate into practice. And sometimes you might be an equal opportunities employer when it comes to race or gender or LBGT+, but rarely on disability. So how do disabled candidates know which employers are going to take them seriously for them to apply in the very first place? So yeah, the second one was a lack of confidence in the recruitment process. So yeah, it was about interviews and CVs and all of the rest of it. And the third one, which I thought might come higher up, was lack of confidence in themselves. So actually, we're going to concentrate today on the first two. There's not much we can do about the third one, except that if we get the first two right, there'll be more disabled people in work, more disabled people will feel confident about their abilities to do that. So they kind of all feed off each other. So just to go through some of the detail, and you have the reports in your packs, but just to quickly go through them. The biggest barrier, and you can see there from the graph, you know, the biggest barrier by far was we don't know who will take us seriously. So, you know, 80-odd% of disabled candidates said the biggest thing is we don't know which candidates will take us, which employers will take us seriously. And our experience is that most employers don't. And the moment that our impairment becomes apparent, whether it's in the CV or the application or in the interview process, that's when the application process comes to a very abrupt end. And we don't know which employers are, you know, a bit more enlightened than that. So that was huge, absolutely huge. And 15% of the people that were surveyed said that they only ever apply to organisations they know to be disability friendly. And we'll talk a bit later on, or my esteemed guests will talk a bit later on about how you know which those employers are. So the second one was, what do you think about employers? Do they understand your needs? Do they understand all about disability? Are they empathetic? And unfortunately, you know, the answer seems to be a resounding no. Now, I know that we're preaching to the converted in here today because you're all here because this is of interest to you. But actually, a lot of employers aren't here because they don't see this as of interest to them, and they're not that interested, generally speaking. So there is a huge lack of trust in employers. So it may well be that you do understand and that you are empathetic, but if the perception is that you aren't, you're not going to get the candidates. So it's how do we overcome that perception? How do we make our candidates know that actually this organisation does understand and we are interested in your talent and we do want to overcome whatever barriers we might be putting in your place. So I think that was quite an interesting one as well. So then we go on to the recruitment process, lack of confidence in the recruitment process. And I've got some quite strong views on this, but I'm not going to share them today. That's for another event, because the panel will be talking about that a little bit later on. But there was a huge number of disabled candidates who said job adverts don't make it clear that adjustments will be available or that this organisation... So it's tied very closely to the first one. If the job advert doesn't look as though you're a disability-friendly company, then they may well not apply. So the job advert needs to say, we will offer adjustments, we do want your talent. And 80% of the respondents said that they found that the job adverts didn't mention this information either all the time or most of the time. So a fairly easy, quick win there, I think. And then the recruitment process in terms of CVs is about having experience, and it's that kind of equity card thing, isn't it? If you don't have experience, you can't get the job because they're looking for experience, but how do you get the experience? and CVs will show what experience somebody has. I think that this is not a proportionate or typical response to this particular question. And when we looked at the demographic of the people who answered our survey, we had a very high percentage of our respondents have degrees, which isn't necessarily reflected in the population. So I think that might be why it wasn't quite so for some candidates, why it wasn't quite so important for them. But for a lot of candidates, if they've had gaps in their CVs, or they haven't worked for a while, or they haven't had jobs which are where they're able to display their brilliance because they have been discriminated against, then their CV isn't going to show their brilliance or the way that they're going to be able to work for you best. And then interviews was huge. So half of our candidates said that they found interviews a big barrier. Now, I don't think that's just about disability. I think most of us freeze at interviews. I'm not sure that sitting in front of a panel of 5 people throwing questions at you brings out the best in anybody, whether you're disabled or not. But, for disabled people, there's sometimes additional layers on that. You might be autistic, you might have a speech impediment, you might have hearing loss, whatever it might be that actually impacts on that. So, there are lots of reasons why interviews might be difficult for all sorts of people. And disturbingly, a lot of our candidates said that as soon as the interviewers see that we're disabled or we mention it, they seem to lose interest. And some candidates were saying, if you go into the interview and your impairment is visible, you can see the look on the interviewer's face. They kind of go, and they might not be doing it consciously, but there's a kind of, I don't even know why I'm in this interview, because they've lost interest. They've already decided they don't want me. We're just going through the process now. So that was a bit unfortunate. So basically, the message is that disabled candidates are saying to employers is, I wish you'd look at my talent. Don't look at my disability. There are ways we can overcome those barriers. They're usually very practical and very simple. I wish you'd just see what I've got to offer. Just look at my talent.